I used to believe there was no sound more comforting than laughter, coming from the kitchen of a home you built yourself. These days, it's that same sound that keeps me awake at night. My name is Nora Ellison, 66 years old, retired English teacher, twice a mother, once a wife, and, according to my eldest son Adam's wife, an outdated woman who doesn't fit the aesthetic. Her word, not mine. Adam and Clara moved into the family house 3 years ago. After my husband died, I let them live there rent-free, thinking it would help them start their business sooner. They promised to take care of everything. I've learned since that promises can also depreciate, like old furniture left too close to the fireplace. It was early spring when I found out about the party. The invitation wasn't meant for me. I accidentally learned about it while buying coffee filters at the market. Mrs. Green from down the street, bless her loud enthusiasm, waved a cream-colored card in front of me and said, "Oh, Nora, you must be so proud. 10 years of marriage already, and what a guest list." I smiled the well-trained teacher's smile and asked, "Guest list?" "Oh, yes. Everyone in town, the mayor's family, the new realtor couple. Clara said they wanted fresh faces at the mansion. You'll make a gorgeous hostess." I remember gripping that coffee bag so tightly, it split at the corner. When I got home, I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe they'd planned a surprise for me. Maybe my invitation was lost in the mail. But as days passed, my mailbox filled with nothing but bills and discount coupons. Finally, I called Adam. He answered on the second ring, his voice all cheerful efficiency, the way he speaks to potential investors. "Mom, can I call you back? Bit of a hectic week." "I just need a minute," I said. "Mrs. Green mentioned a party." Silence. Then a sigh long enough to hold a seated conversation on its own. "Oh, that. Yeah, we're having a small gathering. Nothing formal." 10 years of marriage sounds formal to me, dear." He laughed uneasily. "It's really Clara's thing. She wants something curated. You know how she is about themes. Don't take it personally." He was saying, "Please don't ruin our image." "I see. Well, give her my love," I managed. "Of course, Mom. You know we love you." And then he hung up. The same way people turn off a light in a room they've already left. The house was too quiet afterward. I walked through every room, touching frames on the wall, my husband's photograph, the worn banister he polished every Sunday. All those memories now belong to someone else's interior design theme. That night, I cooked a small dinner for myself, salmon fillet and frozen peas. I set the table for one. Old habits die politely. Outside, I could see the mansion's upper windows glowing. They were testing fairy lights for the celebration. From my porch, those lights looked like distant stars, mocking the sky. The party was scheduled for Saturday. By Friday evening, delivery trucks were lining the driveway. I saw florists carrying bouquets taller than me, caterers rolling towers of champagne glasses, and a band testing microphones. Each sound stabbed the air between our houses. I stood behind my curtains as Clara directed the decorators like a royal general. She wore white silk pants and a hat too wide for any season. At one point, she said something to Adam, and they both laughed. Easy, confident, beautiful in the way people are, when they don't have to remember who paid for their beauty. I withdrew from the window before anyone could see me. Instead, I opened my journal. It had been months since I wrote in it. The first sentence came out without thinking. There comes a day when your own children celebrate inside your dream house and forget the architect. That was the moment I stopped defending them in my heart. Saturday, the street was a runway of cars and perfume. I sat on my porch with a book I didn't read, pretending to enjoy the sunset. Behind the hedge, music rose like arrogance with a bass line. I could hear applause, then a familiar voice. Adam's, toasting to 10 years of love and loyalty. Loyalty. I laughed so quietly it hurt. A neighbor who did get invited walked by and paused. "Oh, Nora, dear, you're not going over." "No, Margaret. This year I decided to celebrate silence." She blinked and hurried away, carrying the kind of pity that burns hotter than anger. When the fireworks started, I poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and watched the sparks light up the sky above my roof. Colors exploded over what used to be my home, then faded in smoke. For once, I did not cry. Pain had become sterile, like a burn that no longer hurts because it's already scarred. Before midnight, the music drifted away, replaced by the low hum of traffic leaving. I closed my curtains, placed my unused book on the table, and said aloud to the empty room, "They can keep the party. The house is still mine." That sentence startled me, half declaration, half invitation. I didn't yet know to what, but that was the night the quiet started to change its meaning from defeat to decision. Morning crept in quietly, as if embarrassed to visit me after the night before. The air still carried the faint scent of fireworks and champagne. My lawn, faithful witness to everything, was littered with tiny shimmers of confetti that had drifted over from next door. I bent to pick up one, a silver heart, and as it caught the sun between my fingers, it looked less like decoration and more like a fragment of something broken. I went about the day as though nothing had happened. Habit is a fine disguise. It lets you perform normality even when your soul is whispering, "What now?" I washed dishes that didn't need washing, watered plants that were already drowning, and folded towels with such concentration you'd think the world depended on neat corners. Around noon, Adam called. I watched the phone vibrate on the counter until it stopped. 3 minutes later, Clara's name lit up the screen. I let that call die too. Their messages followed soon after, phrases like, "Don't be upset, Mom," and "You know how themes work, right?" I didn't delete them. I just refused to open them. Silence can say things no reply ever could. I spent that afternoon sorting through old files. Somewhere between utility bills and faded school yearbooks, I found the original deed to the house. My husband George and I had signed it 28 years ago. The ink now a light brown memory, but still ours. His signature curves strong and sure. Mine leaned slightly, the shyness of a woman who never thought the world would ask for her name. I placed the paper on my dining table and stared at it for a long while. That document wasn't just ownership. It was proof of a life built together, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. each stroke of sweat exchanged for a tile on that floor. The same floor where my son danced with his curated guests last night. People think grief is loud, wailing, breaking things, dramatic exits. It isn't. Grief is folding paperwork in perfect piles. It's putting the deed of your house back into a beige folder with deliberate gentleness so it doesn't tear. It's a kind of worship of what once gave your life shape. Later that week, I walked into town, partly to breathe, partly to confirm I still existed outside my front gate. At the coffee shop, the barista, a soft-spoken girl named Lena, asked if I wanted my usual latte extra hot. She said it the way people ask sick relatives if they've taken their medicine. I smiled, tipped too much, and sat by the window. 2 women at the next table were talking about the party, of course. Parties are born to gossip. "Clara looked like a movie star," one said. "You should have seen the chandelier. It was imported." I sipped my coffee as if it tasted better laced with irony. It struck me that they didn't know it was my chandelier. I'd brought it from New Orleans on our 10th anniversary, the real one, the kind celebrated with gratitude, not hashtags. When I got home, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. 66 isn't old, not really, but it's an age the world likes to photograph from a distance. My reflection looked unfinished. Not ruined, not fading, just waiting. I realized I'd spent years waiting. For calls, for apologies, for respect. Waiting had become my only hobby. I took out my wedding ring. I'd stopped wearing it after George died, but I'd never put it away either. I slipped it back on, not out of mourning, but as a reminder. To myself, to him, to the life we built, that some oaths do last. People die. What they gave you to believe in doesn't have to. That night, I opened my journal again. Words came easier now. The silence after betrayal is louder than thunder. But if you listen long enough, it starts teaching you the language of freedom. Writing that, I felt something shift inside. Small but certain, like the click of a lock opening. The next morning brought rain. I sat on the porch wrapped in an old knitted shawl, watching water slide down the steps. Across the hedge, delivery men were already unloading after-party leftovers. Clara instructed them where to place what she called props. Even her laughter sounded expensive. I noticed she didn't once look toward my house. Inside, the phone rang again. Adam's ringtone, a tune he'd set himself years ago. The sound carried through the house like a ghost of love. I silenced it on the second ring. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply uninterested in Payne's reruns. That afternoon, I visited the library and borrowed a book on property law. A strange choice for someone retired from teaching Shakespeare, but I wanted to understand what exactly belonged to me beyond sentiment. The librarian, Mrs. Caldwell, raised her eyebrows. "Going into real estate, dear?" "Not yet," I said. "Just brushing up on happy endings." Later, over oatmeal and radio jazz, a thought I couldn't ignore took form. Maybe silence wasn't a sentence of defeat. Maybe it was a classroom, and I was the only student willing to stay after the bell. I wrote another entry that night. They built a party on ground I paid for, but I can build a future on the peace they can't afford. And under it, I drew a single small house, a sketch of something simpler, smaller, mine alone. By the time dawn arrived, my notebook was full of plans disguised as reflections. Call the lawyer, check insurance, look up property transfer options, visit Maya. None of them felt like revenge. They felt like paperwork for a resurrection. I closed the journal and whispered, "Let them sleep in silk. I'll wake up in truth." That was the start of my silence changing shape, from something that muffled me into something that protected me. There comes a moment when pity exhausts itself and housekeeping loses its magic. Mine arrived on a Tuesday, carried by the smell of overcooked oatmeal. I looked at the spoon in my hand and realized that, if I didn't do something soon, my life would thicken and harden exactly like that porridge. So, I washed the spoon, tied my hair back, and made an appointment with Mr. Harris, the lawyer who'd handled George's estate. My heart thudded through the entire bus ride to town. It wasn't fear, it was clarity rushing in after a long drought. Mr. Harris still had the same office, wallpaper curling like dry leaves, coffee that smelled like burnt decisions. He greeted me kindly, but with that cautious tone men use with women they think are about to cry. "I'm fine, Edward," I said before he could offer tissues. "I just need to talk about property rights." "That old house again?" "The house," I corrected softly. "And what happens when generosity has overstayed its welcome?" He removed his glasses, studied me, and nodded as if a new chapter had appeared in his paperwork. "You still hold full ownership, Mrs. Ellison. They're occupants, not co-owners. You gave permission to live there. Nothing more." I let those words settle inside me. They felt like oxygen. "If I wished to reclaim it?" I asked. "You could, but I'd advise notice and paperwork." He hesitated. "You're not planning to evict your own son, are you?" "I'm planning to evict my own silence." He didn't quite understand, but he smiled. "We'll draw up the notice. You can decide when to send it." When I stepped back into daylight, the air tasted sweet, sharp, and suddenly possible. That afternoon I called my daughter Maya. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She'd always said the house carried ghosts. She preferred cities where nobody knew her parents' names. Her voice had the same brisk gentleness it always did. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Everything's waking up, darling," I said. "How's Chicago treating you?" "Cold. Why?" "I think it's time I visited, unless you're allergic to mothers." A laugh like old wind chimes. "Come, allergies build immunity." By Friday, I was on a train heading north, my journal tucked in my handbag like a second passport. Every field and factory that slid past the window felt symbolic, leaving behind shame, entering intention. Maya met me at the station wrapped in a green scarf, smelling of paint and cinnamon coffee. Her apartment was small, chaotic, alive. Canvases leaned against every wall, colours spilling onto the floor, the scent of turpentine and dreams. "Stay as long as you like," she said, hugging me. "I've got space. I'll make art smaller." Over dinner, she asked why I'd come. I told her about the party, about not being invited, about the lawyer. She put down her fork, eyes narrowing with the kind of protective anger only daughters have. "He used your house, your money, and left you off the guest list? What are you going to do?" I smiled. "Not scream." "That's new," she said, half teasing. "I've spent a lifetime granting people discounts for bad behavior. The sale ends today." Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Want help drafting the notice?" "I want a proofreader with flair," I said, "and good handwriting." We laughed, but a new understanding glimmered between us. My silence had brought distance. My action was rebuilding bridges. The next morning, while Maya painted, I wrote. Words that weren't diary entries this time. Formal, deliberate language. To Mr. Adam Ellison and Mrs. Clara Ellison. This is to inform you that the period of residence granted at 74 Maple Avenue will conclude 60 days from the receipt of this letter. I folded the pages, sealed them, and laid them on Maya's cluttered desk. She looked at the envelope like it contained electricity. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes, but I'm not mailing it yet. I need all my pieces in place." We spent the weekend walking by the lake. She told me about her art collective for single mothers, how she wanted to open a community studio someday. "I just don't know how to fund it," she said. "Maybe I do," I replied, thinking of the mansion's wide hallways, useless chandeliers, and marble floors more suited for echoes than for love. The idea arrived complete. Repurpose the house for something honest, a place for women who'd given too much, like me. When I returned home, I found the mansion quieter than usual. A for-lease poster had appeared on the corner property. That's when the plan sharpened to a diamond point. I called Mr. Harris. "Edward, could you look into zoning regulations for turning a residence into a non-profit space? Something like a retreat or center." He chuckled. "Always knew you had big teacher energy." "Let's see if wisdom can pay rent," I said. The following days felt lighter. I woke up earlier, made real breakfasts, even ironed curtains that had hung in despair for years. Clara dropped by once, pretending casual friendliness. "Lovely new flowers," she said, glancing around as if checking if poverty had yet moved in. "From Maya," I answered. "I've been visiting her." Her smile twitched. She disliked reminders that the family had a chapter she couldn't edit. As she turned to leave, she noticed the large envelope on my entry table. "What's that?" she asked. "Homework," I said. If curiosity were taxed, she'd owe a fortune. When she'd gone, I slipped the envelope into a drawer. Not yet. Not until timing itself begged for disclosure. Plans, like bread, need patience to rise. That night, I wrote my final journal entry of the week. Freedom doesn't begin with running away. It begins with preparing the map. The map was ready. The lawyer, the letter, the reconnection with Maya, the idea for a house reborn in kindness. What remained was the test of courage. How and when to reveal the truth. For the first time in months, sleep found me easily. I dreamed of the house filled not with music and expensive laughter, but with voices reading, sewing, healing. Women stirring soup in a kitchen that smelled of second chances. In my dream, George walked in, wiped his hands on an old towel and said, "Well, Nora, you've redecorated right this time." I woke smiling. The first Monday of my new life began with something as small as a fresh notebook. I bought it on the way back from the post office, a simple blue journal that smelled faintly of possibility. The clerk stapled the receipt to the front page. I left it there on purpose. Proof of purchase felt like proof of intention. For the first time in years, I walked past the mansion without counting all the ways it hurt me. Its windows glared like polished lies, but my heart no longer flinched. The hurt had cooled into history. Instead of looking at the house, I looked at the empty lot across the street, a corner patch half forgotten, full of dandelions and discarded candy wrappers. I whispered to myself, that's what renewal looks like before it notices itself. Maya and I spent that week drafting a proposal for what we were now calling the Maple Haven Project. Her idea of a community studio merged perfectly with mine for a refuge. Not just for mothers, she insisted, for anyone starting over. I smiled. A club for former doormats. She laughed until her coffee nearly spilled. Exactly. A membership we can't cancel. I wrote letters to local councils, charity boards, even the city's women's centre office. Most replies were polite brush-offs, but one came back promising. A small grant intended to renovate historical properties for public service. Perfect. The mansion was, ironically, listed as a local landmark built in 1973. Clara had probably added that clause to inflate their social profile. Now it would become their undoing. Around the same time, I found myself rediscovering ordinary joy. Morning walks, fresh bread, the radio tuned to old jazz instead of campaign news. At the grocery store, people still mentioned the party, but I no longer felt like the unaired episode of a show everyone enjoyed without me. Lena, the barista, waved as I passed. "We missed you, Mrs. Ellison. Been writing anything lately?" "Yes," I said. "A story with a happy ending. It's under construction." One afternoon, I drove to the coastal town where George and I used to spend summers. I hadn't been there since his funeral. The sea looked unchanged, indifferent in the kindest possible way. I sat on a bench, the sound of waves humming like prayer beads, and pulled that blue notebook from my bag. On the first blank page, I wrote, Phase 1, Courage. Phase 2, Paperwork. Phase 3, Peace. It felt like writing spell work. Maybe it was... I called Mr. Harris from a seaside cafe. "Edward," I said, "draw up the transfer documents. The property is officially becoming Maple Haven Foundation." He paused. "You're sure? That house could be worth a fortune." "I'd rather it generate light than envy," I replied. "Poetic as always," he said. "I'll start tomorrow." When I returned to town, The garden around my small cottage was bursting with early summer. Tomatoes leaning toward the fence, roses rebelling past the trellis. Growth everywhere. Clara came by again, feigning sweetness. "We're thinking of extending the deck," she said, "to host bigger gatherings." I stirred my tea. Interesting idea. She looked pleased, mistaking my calm for consent. Then I added, "Better hurry before ownership gets complicated." Her face froze mid-smile. "What do you mean?" "Oh, just legal housekeeping," I said softly. "The house has been under review. Things change, my dear." She left with a smile so tight it could have sliced bread. Maya stayed a few days, painting in my yard. Between brushstrokes, she said, "Mom, you look different." "Older?" "No, lighter. Like you finally put something down." "Yes," I said. A mansion. That night, we celebrated with soup and bread and an old bottle of George's wine we'd been saving out of habit. We toasted not to revenge, but to clarity. The paperwork moved steadily. Each signed page felt like a pebble laid on a new path. Mr. Harris processed the transfer under a foundation trust, naming me Director Emerita and Maya as Chair of Operations. The house would soon host workshops, therapy sessions, art classes, the kinds of gatherings where people healed instead of pretending to be perfect. I dreamed often about the grand staircase, fresh paint, laughter echoing from real joy, not performance. I saw the ballroom without chandeliers, filled with easels and music. Some mornings I woke in tears, not from pain, but relief that my imagination no longer punished me. Weeks later, I received a formal letter approving the conversion permit. I drove straight to the printers and ordered a modest metal plaque. Maple Haven Foundation, a place to begin again. When I came home, Maya was in the garden. I held the envelope up like a holy relic. She hugged me so tightly the paper crumpled. "What will you tell Adam?" she asked. "I'll tell him the truth, that beginnings and ends are sometimes the same doorway, and this time, I'm the one holding the keys." That evening, I heard laughter again from the mansion. New photo shoot, surely. Cars, lights, chatter. But the sound no longer wounded. It washed over me like a tide that had finally lost interest. I opened my blue notebook to the page labeled Phase 3 and added a single line. Peace sometimes sounds like workmen measuring for curtains in a future that is yours again. When people ask how long healing takes, I want to tell them it's not measured in days but in decisions. The 1,000 quiet yeses to dignity. Each phone call to a lawyer, each signature, each deep breath that chooses poise over pity. And if life grants a soundtrack to courage, it's not applause or fireworks. It's the faint scratch of a pen signing papers that return you to yourself. In my final note for the day, I wrote simply, "Tomorrow the Foundation's press release goes out. The world will finally know what became of the house at 74 Maple Avenue." I turned off the lamp, slipped between cool sheets, and whispered into darkness. Good night, George. Your blueprint is still holding. It took only 24 hours for the floor beneath their perfect shoes to start cracking. At 9 o'clock that morning, I was pouring my second cup of coffee when Mr. Harris called. His voice held both amusement and drama, like someone recounting a play he hadn't meant to see. "They know," he said. I smiled into the steam. Ah, the audience has arrived. Apparently, the press release about the Maple Haven Foundation had gone live at 7. A brief local news piece praising a generous property donation by longtime resident Nora Ellison. The reporter even included a photo of the mansion. My husband's symmetry immortalized one last time, and a caption that read, "Future home of Maple Haven, a center for women rebuilding their lives." Mr. Harris chuckled. Clara called 10 minutes after it aired, accused me of fraud. "You'd have enjoyed the performance." "I doubt it," I said, "but I appreciate the review." I didn't have to wait long for Act 2. By midday, Adam's car screeched into my driveway. The tires spat gravel like punctuation. He didn't knock. He walked in, the way people do when they still think the world obeys them. "Mom, what the hell is this?" He waved a printed copy of the article so close I could smell the ink. "You gave away the house?" "I repurposed it," I said quietly. "That's what teachers do. We reassign value." "Without talking to us?" "You mean without asking permission?" His jaw clenched. "It's our home." "It's a building you were living in," I corrected. "A home belongs to whoever respects it." He paced the kitchen, the same floor he'd once learned to walk on. I could still picture his baby footprints in drying paint. That memory didn't soften me. It only reminded me how long a mother can hold blame without realizing it's weight training. "Do you have any idea what people will think?" he snapped. "Yes," I said. "They'll think I finally did something worthwhile." Clara appeared at the door a few minutes later, immaculate as ever, sunglasses big enough to hide the absence of empathy. "Nora," she began, voice syrupy, "I think there's been some confusion." "No confusion," I said. "Just redecoration. Less gold, more purpose." Her lip twitched. "That property was part of our future." "Then I suggest you build a different one." She turned to Adam. "Say something." He rubbed his forehead. "Mom, you can't just blindside us with this. You should have at least—" "Invited you?" I asked. Funny choice of words, considering. Color rose in his cheeks. "That's different. It was a theme," I finished. "I remember." Clara stepped forward. "You're making a spectacle of this family." "No," I said, lowering my voice so they'd have to listen. "I'm ending one." Silence. The kind of silence that opens like a trapdoor. Then Adam spoke. Softer now. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I've spent years being furniture in my own story," I thought. But what I said was, "Because generosity without gratitude turns toxic." He looked at the floor. "We can work something out. You can stay in the cottage, and we can keep living there. Maybe share the space during events. It's already decided, I said. The first renovation team arrives next week. Clara's voice sharpened. You'll regret this. Possibly, I replied. But at least it will be my regret, not the family's excuse. I walked them to the door. Adam hesitated, still expecting the maternal collapse that always followed conflict. When it didn't come, he looked smaller somehow. Mom, he said quietly, people will talk. Let them, I said. They haven't had a decent story in years. They left without slamming the door. It closed politely, like the end of an era. That evening, Maya came over with takeout and a grin that bordered on wicked. I saw the article, she said. Half the town thinks you've gone revolutionary. Mind if I toast to that? We ate noodles and laughed until hiccups replaced resentment. Somewhere inside that laughter, the air in my house changed. It lost its fear of echoes. Later, we drove past the mansion. The windows were dark except for one upstairs light. Adam's office, perhaps. I caught a glimpse of him through the curtains, pacing, and though I felt a stab of sadness, it wasn't guilt. Some lessons begin only after humiliation finds its student. By Thursday, reporters started calling. I gave one short interview standing in my garden, wearing George's old cardigan. The journalist asked what Maple Haven meant to me. A chance, I said. For women, and for me. Sometimes rebuilding isn't revenge. It's returning to ourselves. That quote ended up in the paper beside my photo. My phone filled with messages from strangers thanking me. I replied to a few, but the best conversation happened with Mrs. Green at the market. Nora, dear, she said, eyes twinkling. I always knew you'd do something unforgettable. Clara must be fuming. She'll survive, I said. Her kind always do. They mistake embarrassment for extinction. Mrs. Green chuckled. If you ever need volunteers, I'm good with coffee machines and gossip. Both valuable skills, I told her. By the weekend, Adam sent a text. We'd like to talk, please. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Maple Haven, Monday, 10 a.m. We'll be there. When they arrived that morning, the renovation crew had already started stripping wallpaper. Paint dust hung like forgiveness in the air. I led them through empty rooms that once held illusions. This is outrageous, Clara whispered. Isn't it beautiful? I said. Adam rubbed the wall where family portraits used to hang. It feels different. It is, I answered. It's honest now. He looked at me then, not as a parent to be managed, but as a person finally visible. You really won't change your mind? I shook my head. I already did. That's why this is happening. When they left, I stood alone in the grand hall. The afternoon light poured through high windows, catching dust motes in golden suspension. I could almost hear George's hammer somewhere in the past, nailing down another beginning. I ran my hand along the banister, whispered to the empty house. You're safe now. The echo answered like a soft amen. I never sought a spotlight, yet sometimes justice insists on fluorescent lighting. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the mayor's office called. They were holding a community awards dinner. Apparently, the Maple Haven Foundation had been nominated for Civic Renewal Initiative of the Year. I almost declined. The thought of applause made my skin itch. But Maya said, "Mom, you stood in the shadows long enough. Let people see what quiet courage looks like." So I bought a new dress. Not expensive, just the color of lavender after rain, and agreed. The dinner was hosted at the town hall. Ironically, the catering company was the same one Clara used for that infamous anniversary party. Life, I've learned, enjoys poetic callbacks. When I entered the hall, conversations paused the way they do when gossip materializes in silk. I could almost hear whispers crawling through the air. That's her. The woman who turned her mansion into a shelter. Did you hear about her son? I smiled at no one in particular and took my seat. Maya introduced me when my name was called. Her voice trembled at first, but then found confidence. My mother taught generations how to read stories. Then she lived one. She turned a symbol of privilege into a sanctuary of hope. Applause rose like soft thunder. I walked to the stage, heart steady, fear finally outsourced to irrelevance. The mayor handed me a silver plaque for generosity in service of community. I took the microphone and said simply, "This isn't about generosity. It's about retrieving a forgotten lesson. That home means safety, not status. And sometimes the first woman you have to rescue is yourself." For a heartbeat, the entire room was silent. Then came applause, real, echoing, contagious. Somewhere near the back, I noticed Adam. He hadn't announced he was coming. His face looked older, edges softened by contrition. After the ceremony, he waited by the exit. Clara wasn't with him. "Congratulations, Mom," he said quietly. "Thank you," I answered, studying him. He looked like the little boy who once brought home wilted daisies and called them roses. "I came to apologize," he said, "for the party, for the way we treated you. Clara left a few days ago. She couldn't handle the attention." Of course she couldn't. The problem with facades is they melt under public warmth. I touched his arm. "Adam, love isn't something you can build on borrowed compassion. But I accept your apology." He blinked fast, swallowed, then nodded. "Could I help at the foundation? Maybe with the renovation?" For a moment I saw George in him. The hands, the regret, the yearning to fix what was breakable. "Help if you want," I said. "But remember, this place isn't being rebuilt for appearances." "I know," he said. And for the first time in years, I believed him. The following week, Maple Haven opened its doors to the public. Reporters milled around the lawn. Volunteers carried boxes of donated books. The ballroom smelled of new paint and possibility. Each room had been repurposed. Bedrooms became counseling spaces. The old dining hall turned into a communal kitchen. Sunlight poured freely now, as if even it had been waiting for permission. I gave the tour, narrating every corner like lines from scripture. "This was the study," I told a woman holding a clipboard. "My late husband designed it for silence and focus. Seems fitting to offer that to people, relearning how to dream. Outside, volunteers erected the new plaque at the gate. I ran my fingers across the engraving. Maple Haven Foundation. A place to begin again. Founder, Nora Ellison. The metal caught the sun and sent a brief flash across the driveway. I imagined George winking. That evening, after reporters left, Adam stayed behind sweeping paint chips from the entryway. "Smells different," he said. "Yes, freedom has its own fragrance." He smiled faintly. "Mind if I speak at the next board meeting as project manager? I owe you some labor." I nodded. "Just show up on time and without a photographer." He laughed. Awkward, genuine, healing. Later that night, I sat alone in the central hall. The new lights hummed softly. The air was warm even without guests. I opened my journal. Some battles roar, others are won by paperwork and patience. Today I signed my name on peace, and for once it felt legally binding. Through the open windows came voices, women setting up cots, someone tuning a radio, laughter spilling down hallways where arrogance once lived. I closed my eyes and listened. That sound, humble and alive, was the greatest music I'd ever heard. A few days later, Mrs. Green visited carrying muffins. "Thought I should see the miracle in person," she said, handing me the basket. "You turned gossip into gospel truth." I laughed. Every rumor needs a redemption arc. She looked around, eyes shining. "Do you ever miss the old life?" I considered it. I miss the people we thought we were, before we learned better. She nodded, as if that statement completed something for her too. By the next Sunday's paper, the headline read, "Teacher turns family estate into haven for second chances." Below it stood a photo of Maya and me cutting a ribbon together. Behind us, Adam was hammering a signpost. Camera accident, but symbolic perfection. That night, I received an email from a woman I'd never met. "My daughter and I just left a toxic home. Thank you for building a place that tells us we're not broken." I typed back only one line: "Welcome home." As I closed my laptop, I whispered into the quiet house. Justice isn't a courtroom, George. It's a roof that doesn't leak when your heart finally rests. The echo that answered sounded almost like gratitude. It's been 6 months since Maple Haven opened its doors. The house smells of fresh coffee and detergent most mornings, a far humbler perfume than the designer candles Clara once ordered by the crate. But to me it smells like truth. Every day, voices echo in these rooms. Laughter, sometimes tears, always humanity. The walls that once held secrets now hold stories. I recognize the difference. Secrets rot in silence. Stories breathe. I start each morning early. Old habits never really leave a teacher. I still like being the first to unlock a classroom, even if that classroom now carries a sign that says, "Art therapy, 9 o'clock a.m." I water the plants by the main window and watch sun spill across the foyer floorboards. It's the same light, but it lands on purpose now. Adam keeps his promise. Shows up before volunteers, clipboard in hand, quiet humility replacing that old urgency to impress. He hangs light fixtures, fixes leaky taps, learns to brew industrial coffee. The women tease him kindly. I catch him smiling at their jokes. He's learning that dignity comes from usefulness, not applause. Clara never returned. Rumor says she moved to the coast. I wish her no harm. People who live on applause often mistake waves for clapping. I hope the ocean teaches her rhythm. Maya runs the daytime programs with a confidence that makes my chest ache with pride. Where George once paced calculating mortgage payments, she now leads circle discussions on forgiveness. Yesterday she said, "Mom, these women call you Miss Nora, like you're the school principal of second chances." I laughed. That sounds like detention done right. Sometimes, during quiet hours, I still wander through the house alone. In what used to be our dining room, the long table now holds art supplies, brushes, glue sticks, colored paper. I run my fingers along its surface and feel gratitude instead of loss. Maybe that's healing, a life that no longer hurts to touch. One afternoon, I found a single envelope on my desk. Inside was a short letter written in Adam's careful script. "Mom, you were right. Home isn't inheritance, it's intention. Thank you for letting me find mine again." There was also a photo, a group shot of our latest volunteer team. He'd written, "My real party," on the back. I laughed, then cried, because apparently those two emotions always arrive as a pair now. As news of Maple Haven spread, more women came. Some stayed a week, some a season. They left letters on my desk. Gratitude poured out in handwriting rough with sincerity. I keep them in a box labeled Echoes. Fitting, don't you think? Every story leaves one. One evening, I hosted a small gathering in the garden. Nothing fancy, no speeches, no photographers, just shared casseroles and folding chairs. As twilight painted everything lavender, I raised a mug of tea and said, "To the sound of peace after noise." Everyone toasted. In that moment, I felt George beside me, the ghost who never haunted, only hummed approval. Later that night, when the lights were out and the kitchen hummed with the low comfort of refrigerators, I sat down with my blue journal, now nearly full. The last page waited, equal parts invitation and farewell. Grace is not the apology the world gives us for suffering. It's the quiet permission we give ourselves to stop rehearsing pain. I used to think getting back at people would make me strong. It didn't. What made me strong was getting back to myself. The woman who wasn't invited to the party learned to host her own, a kinder one, where everyone who enters leaves heavier with dignity and lighter with shame. I closed the book, kissed the cover like a teacher grading her final paper, and placed it in the Maple Haven Library. Visitors will find it, someday and maybe add their own pages. Before bed, I stepped outside. Fireflies dotted the garden. The old oak swayed, whispering the language of patience. Across the road, my cottage glowed softly, a single lamp left on for safety, or maybe for memory. I thought of the first night I watched those party fireworks alone. The sky had exploded with colors that weren't meant for me. Tonight, the same sky was quiet, silver deep, strewn with ordinary stars that needed no permission to shine. I whispered, "See, George? The house finally has guests worth staying for." The wind moved through the branches, an approving rustle. Inside, I locked the door, not to keep anyone out, but to honor what was safely in. And for the first time in years, before sleep claimed me, I didn't rehearse what was lost. I simply felt what was found. The echo of grace stayed in the air long after I closed my eyes.